100 years ago today, thousands of women marched in the streets of Washington to secure the right to vote. Today, thousands more said their march for equality was not complete. Derek Ward now with the battles they're still fighting.
The women from the Delta Sigma Theta sorority were hard to find among the suffragettes of the 1913 march through the streets of Washington. They weren't particularly welcome, but they were there. 12 of them.
Back then, it was in the back of the line because they were colored girls, Negro girls.
On the centennial observance, they were front and center. Women's suffrage is no longer the front and center issue, but there's still a broader suffrage issue embodied in the Voting Rights Act, parts of which are being challenged before the Supreme Court.
I was just in Alabama where a black man, the only one on the county council, had been gerrymandered out of his seat, and they had to invoke the Voting Rights Act to get his seat back. So in parts of the South, it's still quite relevant.
And organizers say issues like equal pay for women, access to health care are battles yet to be relegated to the past.
Isn't that a shame that 100 years later we're still marching for some of the same issues, but it means we still have to be persistent, tenacious, diligent.
And today it meant being up to taking the long way from the Capitol to the grounds of the Washington Monument in a route that took them by the White House, like suffragettes of a century ago.
As we walked in front of the White House, we all waved, just in case someone was peeping out of the windows.
A century ago, the women who marched for this cause on this date got a very different reception along the parade route. They were all jeered and some physically attacked. None of that this time around.
We are a sisterhood that was called to serve 100 years ago, and we will continue to answer the call.
Derek Ward, News 4.
100 years ago today, 10,000 women marched on Washington in a fight to get the right to vote. Well, today, thousands of women from Delta Sigma Theta sorority reenacted an historic demonstration to once again advocate for equality and voting rights for women. Organizers had projected 20,000 women would take part in the Centennial March. It's hard to find anyone anyone in the county anymore. The National Park Service and Park Police are out of the crowd, estimating the business. This march happened without a hitch, and as you can see, a lot of people there taking part, having a very good time. Sorry for that mix-up there. So you are watching Fox 5 News at 6. We're going to be right back with a look at the forecast.
Thanks, Steve. It's been 100 years since women took to the streets of Washington to march for their right to vote. And today, women returned to Pennsylvania Avenue to recreate that march. ABC 7's Richard Reeve was there and joins us from the newsroom. Women have had the right to vote a long time, but Rich, thousands turned out today.
Well, Candace, that's right. This was a huge gathering. As you said, thousands of women marched down Pennsylvania Avenue. They rallied outside the U.S. Capitol, all in remembrance of the 1913 event, which at the time was a way to jumpstart the women's suffrage movement. Call it a march of joy and honor.
We are here to retrace the footsteps of our founders.
Along Pennsylvania Avenue, they marched, a total recall of the Women's Suffrage March of 1913.
There's no better way to honor them than to take their steps the way that they took them.
100 years ago, a pivotal event in the fight for women's voting rights. Newspaper headlines on display outside the museum documented the march, which, unlike today, faced a hostile, mostly male crowd of onlookers.
There wasn't anyone spitting at us or throwing things at us. They, not only at the march, but later with hunger strikes and picketing in front of the White House.
All right, everybody.
Outside the U.S. Capitol, members of Delta Sigma Theta, a sorority that began at Howard University.
This is a good day. Amen. This is a good day.
It's just very emotional for all of us.
And others gathered to celebrate.
Just honoring the founders' memory in this way was very special to me.
Among them, Shirley Richardson and her daughter, Carrie.
Apathy is a huge, huge issue for my generation.
With smartphones recording, a message that social networking is different from street activism.
You think if you sign a petition online, you're doing something. Sometimes you do actually need to stand outside and scream and yell a little bit.
A lesson not to be forgotten.
Women struggled so much for you to get that right to vote, and it shouldn't be taken for granted.
Now, the 1913 march was held the day before President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. Participants were jeered and harassed. Over 200 people were sent to the hospital. It was 7 years after that march that women won the right to vote. Live in the newsroom, Richard Reeve, ABC 7 News.
All right, Richard, thank you.
We've come a long way since women were not allowed to vote. The Women's Suffrage March on Washington actually happened 100 years ago today. As Saray Chin reports tonight, women from all over the world came to commemorate the occasion and retrace the steps of nearly 24 African-American women who participated in that march.
Today is the day that Delta Sigma Theta made its debut to the world.
We're here today to trace the footsteps of our founders.
100 years ago, 22 members of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority from Howard University took steps for women's rights. They were the only African-American women who participated in the Women's Suffrage March on Washington that day.
There were so many people who were against them women getting the right to vote, and certainly African-Americans getting the right to vote. And here we are able to do this freely, just to remember the courage it took for them to leave campus to say, we're standing up for our rights no matter what.
1973.
1979. 2007.
Going to college this fall. And
3 generations of the View family are represented: mother, daughter, and her grandchildren.
I'd like to see my granddaughter become Secretary of State.
Equal rights for women has come a long way in a century. The right to vote, women in Congress, allowed in combat, and getting closer to what men earn. But women say there's a long ways to go.
I feel we made a lot of progress, and hopefully, I'm 53, I will live to see a woman become the President of the United States.
Women also say they're marching for equality for all, including D.C. statehood and a vote in Congress.
I want to see more laws enacted that represent everyone. These are all Delta legacies.
Barbara Brown brought her daughter to stand for the generations of women who have come before and for generations to come.
We definitely want to leave it better than we found it, with our little girls coming up behind us.
In Northwest, Saray Chin, WUSA 9.